let me start introducing our two eminent speakers. I welcome you all to this very important webinar today with two eminent panelists, Katia from the UNFCCC office in Bonn and Reem from the ESCWA office in Lebanon. So we are happy to have two great speaker experts amongst us today. And myself, Neeshad, I am the Executive Director for Arab Youth Climate Movement in Qatar. We are a nonprofit youth-led association in the state of Qatar, working on environmental awareness and climate change advocacy, and also working on to policy development. And we have been quite active recently, and we have been looking for partners to work in a more profound way and getting to work with agencies and research heads. So we are being quite active these days, and we look forward to work with you all in the future. So yeah, that's a short introduction of who we are. So I'm going to start with introducing Katia. Katia Simeonova is a graduate in mathematics from Bulgaria, and she has a PhD in energy systems analysis and from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. She also got an MSc degree in international relationship. She has been at UNFCCC for the last 20 years. That's a quite long time, and that's information we would have from you, who's been supporting the Secretariat on negotiations and climate policies and transparency, and managing the team that deals with reporting, reviewing, and multilateral considerations under the UNFCCC. And thank you, Katia. And I have Reem Nejdawi. She works at the UN Economic and Social Commission for the West Asia, and she's the Chief of Food and Environment Policy Section in Beirut, Lebanon. She has been also the Executive Director for the ESCWA Technology Center in Amman, Jordan. She's a regional sustainable development expert and advice on food security and environmental policy. She also has a illustrious career of 20 years of professional experience with established track record in supporting regional sustainable development policy and strategies. So welcome all of you today. So it's quite a panel. I am so glad we could make it and have such an expert and support we have from the region. And I'm sure this would definitely help a lot of organizations who have been quite active these days, and having such experts would only add more value to us and our region. So I give the mic to Katia to begin with. Floor is yours, Katia, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Neeshad, and thank you very much again for your kind invitation to speak at this webinar. I need to admit that I gladly accepted, because I like this kind of presentations and discussion, because they really allow us to reach out to a broader audience. And as you mentioned, I joined the Climate Change Secretariat shortly after Kyoto, and I witnessed all the evolution of the UNFCCC process. So you can ask me all the tricky questions. I cannot promise that I will respond to all of them, because essentially the purpose of my participation and for my short intervention today is to provide with some information on the UNFCCC process in the context of coronavirus pandemic from the global perspective. And I would like in particularly to focus a little bit on the role of youth. You are all following the news and information from various sources, and we are all aware that the coronavirus pandemic is posing an unprecedented challenge to all of us, and it is affecting everything from economy, industry, and people to forest cover, marine pollution, and wildfire. And it is posing an urgent threat. And this is why the focus of all countries is rightly placed on saving lives and coronavirus fight. In the same time, while coronavirus is an immediate threat for humankind, climate change is the biggest challenge for our generation already now, but also in longer term. And we are all aware that coronavirus and climate change is not exactly the same. There are different kinds of challenges, but they definitely intersect with significant impacts and opportunities. And this is very important to keep in mind. And because of this important nexus, because coronavirus and climate change, I thought that it's a very kind of thought-provoking opportunity for me to engage in this webinar and to contribute to it. and to explain how we at the UNFCCC are adapting and adjusting to this new and very unexpected circumstances, as a black swan, as Nassim Taleb wrote in his famous book. And the main goal in this process of adjustment to the new circumstances is essentially to ensure that work progresses on climate change, that valuable time is not lost, and that we are getting ready for a green recovery from COVID situation. I wish to start first by informing you that already on April 1st, and this is not a joke, the COP Bureau took a decision to postpone the SB session, and SB stands for subsidiary bodies, which are the main technical bodies where the discussion under the UNFCCC takes place, to October 2020. And the Bureau also took decision to postpone. Somebody needs to mute.
Sorry. Just hold there, Katia. I request everybody to mute for those who are not speaking. Thank you.
And COP26 also, and the COP Bureau also took decision to postpone COP26 to 2021. And the main reason was to take care of the health and well-being of delegates, and to ensure inclusive participation, and also to ensure that no issue from very rich climate agenda is left behind. So these were the two main considerations by the COP Bureau. And what we are doing now, following the decision by the COP Bureau, we are developing detailed proposals under the guidance of the subsidiary body chairs and the COP presidency on how to ensure that multilateral process can keep momentum and continue to play its critical role even in the context of the coronavirus situation, and also to ensure how the vision that we have from political leadership on climate change for 2020 is fulfilled and all tasks are delivered according to the mandates. And this is why I want to highlight first what we would like to achieve and then how we are planning to achieve it. On the what question, I want to highlight first that we are all aware that 2020 is a special year for climate change, when submissions of new and updated NDCs are due. So far, we have received such submissions from 9 countries and expect that almost all countries make submissions by the end of the year. The submission of the NDCs was not tied to the COP. It's tied to the calendar year, and this is why, hence our expectations. Also, 2020 is a special year because this is the year when we expect countries to submit their long-term low GHG development strategies. And these strategies, although they look in the very long-term perspective, they charter the way forward and show the trajectory in which the NDCs that countries submit should fit. Secondly, I wanted to highlight that on what we are aiming to achieve this year, specifically on negotiations. And these are two groups of issues. First of all, the aim is to advance significantly the work on the 3 outstanding issues from Katowice rulebook. This is Article 6, transparency and common time frames on NDCs. In the same time, we also need to achieve, and this is very urgent, to achieve tangible progress on finance, technology, capacity building, and adaptation. And this is essential in terms of giving assurance to developing countries that their efforts to increase ambition could be supported. Thirdly, I wanted to highlight that 2020 is expected also to see a major advancement of the Global Climate Action Agenda, or as we call it, GCA. Under the GCA, countries and all other stakeholders will continue in 2020 to demonstrate strong action on climate change that is in line with what science demands us to do, and also action to support developing countries and stakeholders from these countries. So these are the 3 main what components of the what questions. And now moving to how question, how we would like to achieve this. So, and how question is very, very complex and difficult in this coronavirus context, because how question is essentially about how we can keep momentum given the context. And this is why we need firstly to look in how we are preparing the SB session in October, which will be the only formal negotiation session for the year on climate change. And this is very, this is a precedent for the climate change process. We have had years when we had 3 negotiation sessions. We had years when we have 4 negotiation sessions, but this is the first time in history when we have only 1 session. Therefore, it creates a lot of expectations and also needs a lot of preparation. We are now in the process of making the arrangements for virtual meetings of various bodies under the convention. And these meetings are very important to build momentum and pave the way for the successful discussions and delivery at the SB sessions. And we have very positive experience with the virtual meetings. Of course, we should not pretend that there are no problems, but I think we are solving them quite successfully. And in cases when there are virtual problems with virtual connectivities, at the UNFCCC side, we have done the utmost to ensure adequate alternative options for participants from all parties and members to attend these meetings of the constituted bodies. Secondly, in response to the mandate coming from the Bureau meeting, the chairs of the subsidiary bodies are now preparing a very comprehensive plan for the session in October. And this is a plan that aims of maintaining the political momentum through advancing technical work. But this is also a plan that fully takes into account any possible restrictions that may stem from the coronavirus pandemic and puts the health and well-being of participants first. The plan also outlines innovative options and solutions for organizing the session, keeping in mind that we may need to have restricted participation in the session, but also finding the best way of blending virtual and in-person participation. Again, we should not be shy of the fact that these virtual meetings are very good for exchange of information, building momentums, but they are not perfect for negotiations. Then thirdly, as this is a webinar about the youth, I wish to inform you that there is a planned pre-COP event called Youth and Climate Change, and this event will be also postponed. And again, the main reason for postponing this event is to ensure full participation of youth. And this is imperative because dealing with climate change requires strong, global, and ambitious action by all stakeholders, and youth in particular. Now, in closing, I wish to share with you that we at the Secretariat are committed to advancing work on climate change in these challenging times. And we have done so because climate change is not taking break from coronavirus. It's clear for everybody. Our work in 2020 is not on hold in any form, and we have very extensive agenda, and we are very much looking forward for engagement of parties and stakeholders, all stakeholders and youth in particular, in this very rich agenda. Just a few short points again on Petersburg dialogue. This is a very decisive event of climate diplomacy that engaged diplomats and ministers around the globe. The dialogue concluded with a very strong message and appeal to place climate change in the center of the green recovery from coronavirus situation. And there was a very strong emphasis that on the point that unlike coronavirus, we know the vaccine against climate change that is available, affordable, and make life of people much better. And I'm very confident that the Arab youth will stay engaged, building on the outcomes from 2000, very remarkable event, by the way, 2019 Youth Climate Summit in New York, and also be engaged in this UN strategy for youth, which is with 2030 horizon. And of course, I'll be very happy to respond to any questions. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Katia. Thank you for giving us the insight and also making sure that much people have this idea that NDCs may be also postponed. Thank you for getting that clarity that NDC stays as decided, because that's a year on calendar as such, and also giving what are the mandates going ahead this year, and given the COVID issue, and also highlighting how difficult it is to have a virtual meeting or negotiations. And also I wanted to highlight that how civil society would also feel it difficult to engage, because you cannot push the countries without sort of having some time physical presence, because that sort of engagement have happened in the past. So this is important to have this real meetings, in-person meetings sometime. And also, again, we also have to see that not everybody have the access to internet, and this is not the same everywhere. So might be some of the people or a community would be left apart in our joint efforts for climate action. So thank you for giving that overall ideas, and I'm sure we will have great questions coming up once we have Reem giving her short intro. So I welcome Ms. Reem Nejdawi to take us the floor and give an insight from the Arab region.
Thank you, Neeshad. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for providing this podium. Actually, it was interesting to hear what Katia just mentioned. It was supposed to be the year of action for climate change, and it was stopped by the pandemic, and we have to look at this as an opportunity. Although the pandemic or the COVID-19 is so different than the climate change, but they also share some common characteristics. They both are global. They don't respect boundaries. There are no national boundaries. They go across, and they severely affect the lives and the livelihoods of people. And if we look at these similarities, we can definitely learn a lot from this process of COVID for our climate actions in the future. Actually, what I would like to talk about is the effect of COVID-19 on several issues: on economy, on food security, on water security, energy, and of course, all will come into climate change. But looking at the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs attainment from these perspectives, from the poverty, food security, water, energy, and economic lenses. In the Arab region, we were already in a dire situation. Poverty was high, poverty rates were high, unemployment was high, inflation was also considered high as an average for the region, we had big challenges to overcome in terms of food security, and we definitely we are and we were and we are and we will still be the most water scarce region. So we face big issues with water availability. Now, with this COVID-19, this is further exacerbated. The situation is further exacerbated. If we look at poverty, we were around 90-something million person who suffered from poverty before COVID-19. Now, the estimates that ESCWA has put forward tells us that we will exceed 100 million persons suffering from poverty. That means almost one of each 4 Arab residents face poverty. That is too high of a number. This is exacerbated by the COVID-19 now with unemployment. We know that we have a major sector of informal employment, and due to COVID-19 quarantine and social distancing, now the informal sector has lost its livelihood base and became further dependent on state social protection, which is already lagging. The social protection mechanisms available in the Arab region has been inadequate without COVID-19, and now with COVID-19 we think it is going that the gap will be bigger because more people need support, and the means to provide this support is not available. The region loses 1.7 million jobs in 2020, according to earlier estimates of ESCWA in March. I'm sure the number will be much higher because we didn't know at the time we did these estimates or projections, if I may call them, not estimates, projections. We didn't know to what extent this pandemic is affecting the Arab region. So far, we are seeing that it will be a long-term issue. It's not going to end within a few months. So the effect will be much more visible to us. We know that the region will lose 8% of its wealth due to the pandemic. As I said, additional 8.3 people will fall into poverty. 2 million people, additional people, will not have sufficient food. Currently, we have around 50 million people facing undernourishment, and this will be increasing further with the pandemic. People are facing food insecurity because of several reasons. They are getting poorer. They don't have a means of livelihood. The farmers' work is disrupted, and the food is not getting where it should get on time. And when it gets on time, it is very expensive and people can't afford it. The poor people will not have access to food. And this is a serious issue when you start thinking about a necessity, a human right as food security. In addition, we know that the region, according to our projections, will lose $42 billion in income in 2020. And these, again, these are initial projections, and I'm sure the numbers will be higher while we know the extent of this crisis and it is being unfolded. This is the situation pre-pandemic, and this is the situation that we are projecting. Now, if we add to these issues additional challenges, for example, in access to water, we know that water use is increasing during the pandemic. We are told to wash our hands over and over, and we have 74 million people who might be subjected to getting COVID-19 because they don't have access to clean water to wash their hands. We know that the increase in the demand for water will put an additional challenge for already burdened budgets of the Arab region. We are projecting to have additional $150 to $250 million per month in expenses for the increased demand for water. So we know that for energy, for example, 95% of the Arab regional energy supply is based on fossil fuels. It is a fossil fuel dependent market in the Arab region. We know that 50% of the LDC's rural population don't have access to this energy. By default, we have a major problem here when 50% of the LDC's population don't have access to energy. They can't afford to cook their food, to clean their water, to boil their water, to have access to clean water. This is really the overall situation. If we add to it the conflicts and wars that we are subjected to in the region, we know that, for example, we have around 26 million people who were either displaced or is considered refugees in another country. This is, and all these people need support. They need help from international organizations, from the host organizations, from the original or the country of origin. This is a big number. We host, Lebanon, for example, hosts the largest refugee communities around the world. We have major problems with people needing humanitarian assistance. We have around 55 million people who need humanitarian assistance. These numbers are shocking by themselves. Try to add to them a crisis of COVID-19. Major countries, developed countries, are facing challenges because of this pandemic, while they were doing much better than we were before the crisis. Now, my other issue is that the Arab region have neglected the agricultural sector for so long. And if you come now and you see that we are back to basics, and basics tell us that the agricultural sector should take its focus. It is where our food comes from. We understand we have arid lands, or 90% of our land is suffering from desertification. However, and we have scarcity of water. However, we have the lowest efficiency in using our land, in using, and the productivity of water is the least. We are not following up with technology to ensure we use these resources, the natural resources, with optimum capacity and optimum productivity. We have all these issues, and if you look at the time frame of the 2030 agenda, for example, are we going to be able to achieve those goals by 2030, facing all these problems together? This is a question that I think we need, as international organizations, as governments and states, we need to look into how to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs and how to achieve the commitments in Paris Agreement, so that our nations, our people live live the life that they deserve to live. I will stop here and wait for questions. Sure. To provide further details.
Thank you, Reem. Thank you for getting an update from the region in act of COVID, and how the region is suffering from already existing issues, from water to other issues. Also highlighting the agricultural perspective. Now, every country are depending on their own food and activities, which has been quite neglected as well. And also the impacts of climate would be exacerbating the existing situation, which our region has been always suffering from. So it's an added suffering to the lot of people who are suffering at this point from food or employment, or also job losses. I see the report which says that the region would be really having a big loss in direct foreign investment. So it doesn't look quite encouraging, and given that also have a bigger impacts on government's commitments to climate action, because the priority goes on economic development. But as how the Secretary General gave us a report yesterday, which was published in the New York Times, he was asking that recovery plan would be more supporting sustainable ways, or how we can have supporting financial simulations, which can definitely help the government to recover and economically and also environment friendly. So yeah, now I give the floor to our team to ask question. I want everybody to be very precise and direct question. And who do you want to address to? And we're also running out of time, so I'm requesting everybody to keep the questions straight and let me know who want to answer the first. You can just unmute and just go ahead with your question, please. So I believe we don't have any questions. People are very happy and they got all the answers, I believe.
Let me just ask a quick question, particularly. This is for Reem, actually, on social protection system. This is something that we don't really talk a lot about it. I mean, I know ILO publishes regular reports. If you look, the ILO's report has been consistent about the Middle Eastern countries. There is no strong social protection system. And on top of it, you have the conflict and violence, and more people's been pushed to poverty. And then this dire circumstances that we are living in, a crisis that no other that we have seen. I guess this is the time, real time, that to have a much more coordinated response from the UN and from, like, that there should be a strong lobby to all the Arab world, especially the poorest countries. The rich countries like the Gulf, where we are, is much stable. Like, there is a strong cushion for that. But the poorest countries are often falls back into poverty. I guess this is the right time to have a very strong social protection system, not just like at a national level, but at a community level, at a disaggregated district or a state level. State protection, social protection systems need to be there, because like we have seen some cases, like when you have a stronger social protection system, the response, the risk of being again poor is very minimal, and there's so much evidence to that one. So do you see that that's going to be the case, or do you see the governments are learning anything from this crisis to build on this one, and given the long neglect of social protection system, what do you see here?
Do you want me to answer right away? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this is a very important issue for ESCWA specifically. ESCWA called for establishment of a regional fund to support such initiatives for promotion of social protection services. There is a big problem because in the middle income countries, as well as in the LDCs, the social protection systems are not adequate, not enough. And we have seen that this caused a crisis now within COVID-19. I know that in Lebanon, the people are donating to a fund to provide support for those who lost their livelihood, or for the poor, for the elderly, for the people with disabilities. We are facing these challenges in a crisis mode. This would not have been the case if things were prepared before. I think this wake-up call to look into the basic stuff. Social protection is not a luxury. It is a need, and it should be available for all countries, and the international community has a role in supporting LDCs to establish good social or adequate social protection systems. The issue here is that we can see that the government's role is becoming more and more visible during this crisis. The private sector, the civil society, international organizations all have roles. However, the government is in the driver's seat. They are the ones that need to coordinate the work of all other actors. They are the ones that need to put priorities in order. So social protection systems are a priority, and the states need to ensure that it is in place in cooperation with all the other actors, including international community. And as I said, ESCWA has called for establishing a social protection fund for the region, as well as a food security fund that can ensure availability of food during crises like this pandemic. And we are expecting also other crises, as Katia and Neeshad mentioned. Because of climate, we can see that this opportunity to learn how to deal with crisis, how to prepare, how to build the resilience of the different sectors to such crisis, how important this issue is. It's not a luxury anymore.
Thank you, Reem. So any question from our participant? I have a question to Katia. What sort of an outcome from the Pittsburgh Climate Dialogue, which was concluded yesterday, I believe. So do we have any statement given the fact that this year was supposed to be the decade of action, and given that now we are not going to foresee some sort of dialogue happening, at least. So what was sort of the outcome from the Pittsburgh Climate Dialogue?
Thank you very much, Neeshad, for this important question. As I have mentioned, Petersburg Dialogue is one of the most important meetings of climate diplomacy during the year, and it squarely focused on climate change in the context of coronavirus situation. What was the outcome of the meeting will be a summary that will kind of capture the main messages that came out of the discussion, and in this way we'll kind of provide not legally binding commitment like our decisions in the UNFCCC process, but rather a political context in which countries can continue to frame both their responses to coronavirus, but also for climate change, in order to ensure that focus on coronavirus, which is at the moment, which is very well understood, does not shift attention from climate change. And it, at least for me, it was very reassuring to hear the commitments at both the political level, but also at the level of negotiators, to reaffirm the commitments to climate change objectives, to goals and pathways outlined in the Paris Agreement. And there is one important point that I wanted to highlight that also came very clearly through the Petersburg Dialogue. One of the key issues that we always discuss, and that is very, very difficult, is climate finance. And what we are speaking about in the UNFCCC process is about the famous 100 billion. Where are the 100 billion for 2020? This is your pledge. How to account for them, and so on and so on. And everybody knows that addressing effectively climate change is a huge task. It's not about 100 billion, it's much more than that. As Reem mentioned, there are a lot of lessons that come from coronavirus that could be used also for climate change. And here, for coronavirus, at least when you look at the US, look at Europe, look at Japan, we are speaking about trillions of dollars that will be put in recovery of coronavirus. And this is what Petersburg essentially message was, that governments can do two things. They could put these trillions of dollars of recovery following the existing business as usual ways and approaches, and this will lock into inefficient infrastructure and carbon-intensive infrastructure. But it could be done differently. So these trillions of dollars could be tailored not only to the need for economic recovery, but also to meet climate change and sustainable development goals by focusing more on renewable energy, electric mobility, efficient agriculture that Reem mentioned, because efficient agriculture can help in 3 different ways. It can help with food security, it can help with resilience of agriculture, which is very important in a climate, in a warmer world, but can also help with reducing emissions through efficient practices in agriculture. So there are fantastic opportunities, and I think this is the most important. If I have to respond what in few words, what is the most important from Petersburg dialogue is that look at opportunities which are created by green recovery. Don't miss this opportunity, because recovery will be based to a large extent or incentivized by public money. This money can be spent only once. They cannot be spent initially on coronavirus and then spent on climate change, and they need to be spent in a very smart and wise way. Chartering the way for sustainable development future, and also helping, and this is very, very important point, helping the poor and most vulnerable communities that are already under stress, but this stress and pressure is exacerbated by both climate change and the coronavirus situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katia, for giving the update and how we look forward for the year, given the pandemic year, and also making sure the climate action stays on top priority, and also how going forward, the COVID recovery can also be a climate action, and that will definitely mitigate both the issues at the same time. So being mindful of that would be a great way for all the government to act at this point of time. And also, I would ask a question to Reem. If there is somebody else want to ask a question, please do let me know. So my question to Reem is on the region. Like we always haven't seen, climate wasn't on top of priority for the most government because of obvious reason. For the region is indulged in a lot of war. Another would be highest unemployment. So climate always stays on the bottom because they want to obviously make sure that the young people in the region are feeling happy, they have the job, and they are having the livelihood and things like that. So now I see myself on a personal note that a lot of people start talking about our environment is getting better, and social media plays a big role there. And this is something captivating to me that I see that in the region too. Okay, in the Europe it's quite normal; they react very fast to such good things. But I see in the Arab region too, there was a duck going around in the Dubai street. They say, "Hey, ducks on the traffic signal in Dubai." So do you think this sort of a public display of what can be a positive world would help in the Arab world too? Because people have seen most in this part of the region, the crisis we're going through in Yemen or in Syria, and also all the refugee issues, which is Lebanon and Jordan. So do you foresee sort of this pandemic would be really eye-opener for the leaders in the region to on coexistence, and also that a positive world is possible? Because now shutting down is not how we want to see in our post-COVID. We want to see is that where everything is fine, people have a nice livelihood, they live in a prosperous way, people can travel and meet the loved ones. I mean, that's the most important aspect. Do you think going forward, the Arab region would learn something out of this?
Definitely, as we mentioned from the beginning, that this is an opportunity. However, we have to be realistic. First, your comment on seeing these changes in the environment, I think these are great changes, from the smallest thing, like listening to birds in the morning, because the birds are coming back to the trees, while during, and I'm talking because I'm right now in Amman, and we had total shutdown for like over a month, and we can see that animals are out, cats are in the streets, the birds are out, we can see things that are different. Now, these are not good memories during quarantine, but nevertheless, we have to take the lesson. We have to take care of our environment. This is the environment we depend on to live. And our kids, our children will live in this, on this planet. They need to find a healthy planet that we left them, a healthy planet. Now, coming back to governance, my fear, and I'm not sure this is not based on any scientific research, but my fear is that governments are so overwhelmed and so so busy right now tackling immediate issues that climate change with its long-term vision is not going to be on top of their agendas. Right now, they need to recover the economy. They need to find jobs for people who are out of jobs. They need, first of all, actually save lives and keep people healthy and safe. So they have a lot on their plate. And I'm not sure that climate change is going to be on top of these priorities right now. However, we can think with a different perspective. We have an opportunity to provide experiences for our member countries to show how a different model can be the response or the recovery from COVID-19. A different economic model that is built on sustainable consumption and production, that is built on efficient use of our natural resources, that is built on taking care of our environment, looking into alternative energy sources. There are many things that can be put on the agenda of the government that is in response to COVID-19 that can help the agenda of the climate change. However, it needs to be coordinated and put in a way that does not show that it is a long-term issue, because now governments are faced with immediate responses that they need to take. And this is actually a big burden that is put on us to be able to balance between the immediate responses and the long-term objectives that we stress and advocate for to help our children have a healthy planet.
Thank you, Reem. I have taken quite extra time than what we planned to. I apologize for that. It's supposed to be a sharp 30 minutes. Yeah, we started 5 minutes late, but I'm thank you for both of you, Ms. Katia and Mr. Reem, for having you here and giving us this insight. And I'm sure those who couldn't join will be sharing this recording so they can watch and learn and also understand what's happening at the regional level and the global level. Before we sign off, I would have to have a final statement from Katia in regards to what young people can do and what are their role given the scenario from a global perspective from you, Katia, and Reem from the Arab regional perspective. Final words on what young people can do for the region.
Thank you very much, Neeshad, for this very, very important and pertinent question. What we have seen in Madrid conference is that young people came together and then they really made a very, very important point and requested governments and stakeholders to approach climate change in a much more rigorous way as compared to what we have done so far. Essentially, they made the point that these are the people that will live in, let's say, 50, 60 and so on years, and the action that are taken today or are not taken today will have long-lasting impact on the future of the planet in which we live, in which they will be living. and they really required immediate response. And then the question is the UNFCCC process fit to provide such immediate response? It's a very, very important and very complex question, because UNFCCC process is a kind of diplomatic process.
Yeah.
That is fit to negotiate international treaties, to look at their implementation and so on. But what the youth demands us to do requires also to rethink the UNFCCC process, to do things differently at much faster speed, and also to tap the huge potential, to harness the potential of ideas and energy of the youth, young people in finding and implementing effective climate responses that will create jobs, that will create clean environment, and that will make a huge difference in life of every human being on the earth. So this is, on my view, the role of youth and climate change, and I'm very much looking forward to their further engagement in our process. Thank you.
Thank you, Katia. You're in now.
Actually, this is really a great question. I can see that the youth can have really a big role. First, they are more aware of the issues than we think they are. They have they delved into the internet and the resources much more than I would talk about my own generation, that we depended more on books and what we are taught in a classroom. And I think this ability of getting their sources and their ideas from different sources is really an important issue. Second, technology. Katia mentioned how important the technology is in negotiations and in the processes of climate change. And I think this issue of technology transfer and technology adaptation and localization is really an important issue. And the youth are more flexible and adaptive to such technologies. And this is an important issue for our region, because we're lagging behind on all other regions. We don't consider research and technology as an important priority right now, but our youth do think this is the way forward. So this is one. However, we have to make sure that they are provided with other resources, such as the financing. There is a complication, and it's becoming too complicated to approach financing for climate change, or approach financing for any other reason, actually, in our region. Access to financing is an important issue. The other issue is capacity building. Capacity building is essential because they are flexible and agile. Whatever you feed them, they're able to process and produce. So if you provide the right capacity, if you provide the right financing and access to technology through technology transfer, I think our new generation, the generation that will lead the Arab region, can be in a much better position than ours right now. So I have big hopes. I have children of my own, and I think they are equipped better than we did, and we have hopes that they will be able to lead this next big leaps and big steps.
Thank you, Reem. We hope we do lead, and we give up the hope on that. And we are definitely leading at this point of time. And we hope young people from our region and globally are forefront for climate and SDGs. So I'm sure this would be a great sort of encouraging words from both of our expert speakers here today. And I would once again thank both Katia and Reem for having you both here. It was extremely a privilege and an honor for us to host you today. and giving us a good insight from a both global and local perspective, and what can be done and what are the pathways forward with the COVID around. But the fact is nothing changes. Our issues are still sustaining, and we have to face it. And moving forward, we together would able to fulfill it. Thank you so much for having you both and all our listeners today. Thank you for joining us. And I once again apologize for taking you 30 minutes more than what was planned. So I hope it was more engaging, and I wish you all the best, and please stay safe and stay home. Thank you all for joining us today.
Wishing
Thank you.
all
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.